Welcome to Health Matters with Dr. Nelson Bulmash, sponsored by the UI Radio Network at uiradionetwork.org. Catch us on Facebook and Instagram at United Intentions and Twitter at Higher Intention. Look for us on 99.1 FM, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Stitcher, Blog Talk Radio, and many more. Over the next hour, we'll introduce you to some fascinating people and engaging discussions that may provide you with answers to assist in revolutionizing your own personal health. And now, here's Dr. Nelson.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Nelson Bulmash, the host of Health Matters on the UI Media Network. It's such a pleasure to be with you here today. I want to talk to you about somebody who is very, very unique and has a perspective on healing that you're going to want to hear about. So one of the things, other than how, Dr. Nelson Bulmash, do I see your show after it is actually aired live? That is the most popular question, and I'll give you an answer to that shortly. But the other question that I get so often from you folks is, Dr. Nelson, I have so much pain and I have such difficulty getting through it. It really decreases the quality of my life. And I hear you. I hear all of you. Some of you have done almost nothing because you don't know what to do. You've been to your medical doctors and they've given you anything from anti-inflammatory medication to pain medication to steroids and everything in between. I know that many of you are looking at ways that are creative to get you out of the opioid crisis, because I know many of you have spoken to me about that being a very real problem for you as well. So what we're doing today is we're looking at ways that you can use that are more holistic in nature, that will help you not only get out of pain, because folks, we don't just want to turn off the alarm and have our house burn down. We want to figure out ways that we can think, function, feel, and heal better. And I'm just going to take a moment and talk about this, because pain does crazy things to you. It can make you irascible, so your friends and family members, your coworkers don't want to work with you. It can keep you upset. It can leave you feeling for anything from enraged to having difficulty sleeping to having bouts of suicidal tendencies and everything in between. So it's not a fun place, and I can relate to this. So I do a lot of talking about this because, as many of you know, I broke my back in 4 to 6 places when I was in my 20s and still deal with more pain than I'd like to, although much less than I have in the past. So my friend today, in full disclosure, she's not only my friend, she's not only my acquaintance, she's not only a very, very gifted healer, but she does work in my office. I want to make that very, very transparent to you. However, don't doubt her and don't undervalue her. She is a gift. She helps a lot of people. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a chiropractor, a naturopath, a nutritionist, among other things. I mean, I'm a writer. I've been a high-level strength coach and so forth. But how it relates to this conversation today is that she helps me when I need help getting people to function better. And what I mean by that is I'm going to use myself as an example. So when I was 22 years old, I had a horrible accident. I fell down a flight of stairs at the University of Michigan, broke my back in 4 to 6 places. And I couldn't understand why I went from having very strong hamstrings to hamstrings that often cramp when I bent over to tie my shoes. So what ended up happening is I had certain muscles that were too active and that were inactivating other muscles. So what you're going to learn about today is there are many things that can do that. You can have scars that inhibit the proper firing of certain muscles. You can have chronic overuse, underuse issues. You can have traumas, car accidents, falling downstairs like I did, that really inhibit proper functioning of the nervous system and the musculoskeletal system. We're going to talk extensively about that today. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. And for those of you who come back often to hear me, you know what I'm going to tell you. Map this interview onto your own life and see where you get solutions to problems or to questions that you have. Okay? All right, now hang on, folks. I've got some talking points that I want to mention to you, and then I'm going to start the interview with Allison Pfeiffer. Okay, first of all, let me thank all those of you right here in Atlanta who are catching the show on Talk 10 FM and WDJY FM 99.1. I so appreciate my hometown folks. Thank you. And for my friends, family, and followers who are listening to me in Kentucky and Ohio on WTTA 101.2 FM, you are so appreciated. Thank you. I do hope to hear from more of you, though. You know, I got family up in the Ohio area here, so I'd love for you guys to get a little bit more interactive. You're not as communicative as the folks on social media and the folks right here in Atlanta. So show me who you are and what you're up to. Love to hear your questions and your comments. If you're interested in calling, by the way, we would like to hear from you. And the phone number is 678-495-4345. Again, that's 678-495-4345. Also, we take questions through Facebook Live, so please don't hesitate. How do you get us? It's really simple, folks. All you have to do is log on to Facebook, look us up at United Intentions, and there I will be smiling back at you with my guest to my left, Allison Pfeiffer. Okay, now, a couple more points and we'll get started here. Listen, you now are able to buy our Conscious Journal. Plan your day intentionally with our Seeds of Intention Daily Conscious Planner. All you have to do is visit our site at www.unitedintentions.org and you can learn more. Okay. Now, I was sort of joking, but not, because I have so many people. Evidently, my show at 5 o'clock is when a lot of people are either finishing work or just getting in their cars to go home. So if you miss part of the show or you can't catch the live version, not a problem at all. All you have to go do is download our UI Media app at uimediaapp.com. It's incredible. What's so cool about this, folks, is I have you contact me and say, Nelson, this was fantastic. I took a trip from Atlanta to Miami, and I listened to 4 of your shows on the way down. And that's what a lot of people do. So, but not only am I there, you can get the shows of every host that is involved with the United Intentions Foundation. So get our app at uimediaapp.com today. But wait until the show is over. Okay, folks? You don't want to miss any of this conversation. All right. Don't forget, if you want to connect with us online, you may certainly do so. All you have to do is on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find us at United Intentions and Higher Intentions on Twitter. Now, if you want to get a hold of me, please do so. I'm Dr. Nelson Bulmash, and you can get a hold of me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Love to hear from you. All righty. We have tomorrow on the Good Intentions Show at 11 a.m., Tim Ray will be interviewing author, speaker, wellness trainer, yoga and meditation teacher, Cindy Lutz. It'll be a great show. Tim's shows are really amazing. He's a great host, and you will always be entertained. So don't miss it. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. Okay, now, here's a big deal. I've gotten very excited about this, and I hope you have too. Save this date. Write it on your calendar. July 20th, we'll be at the Gate City Brewing Company here in Roswell, Georgia for our Awaken Atlanta celebration. Join us for fun and good times. All you have to do is go to UI Media Celebration Party on Facebook and respond. Let us know you're coming. Why? Because, folks, we got to have enough for you to eat and drink. Okay? All right. Allison Pfeiffer, are you still with me? Allison, it's such a pleasure to have you on my show, Health Matters. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. Doesn't she have an amazing radio voice? I'm hoping one day maybe she has her own radio show, or maybe she can be a guest more frequently on my show. What do you think, folks? Okay, so you do something that is truly unique. Matter of fact, before I met you, I never even heard of NKT, which stands for Neurokinetic Therapy.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what NKT is and how you got into it.
I would love to. So neurokinetic therapy is a system of assessing body function that looks for muscles that are not firing properly. And we have tools to kind of see what other muscles in the body have taken over for what functions it should have. There are systems in the body that work together.
Right.
And usually within that system, some muscles can be overworking and others will be underfiring. And so it's a way to look at how dysfunction is created in the body and what we need to do to change it back to proper functioning movement patterns and normal processes the body should be able to fire.
Got it. So what's really interesting to me is, this notion of neurokinetic therapy kind of came out of nowhere. I thought, just when you think you've been around the block a few times and you're familiar with every unique system of care that could help people, you show up in my life. And it's really been an interesting ride. So I mentioned, Allison, that I injured myself very badly. I broke my back, not just fractured it. I mean, the segments were separated. 4 that the radiologists agreed on, and 2 more that they were like, you probably fractured these 2, but they're not as severe as these.
Right.
Well, you did an evaluation on me, and you found something that I thought was quite interesting. You found that a group of muscles in my lower back were hypervigilant, hyperactivated, and were actually shutting off my hamstrings.
Correct.
Yeah, that was so interesting to me. And
Yeah.
I don't even know if I told you this, and it's a little embarrassing, but I have 9 tears of my left lower adductors and hamstrings.
We did talk a little bit
Did we
about
talk
that,
about
yeah,
that?
because I was looking for relationships and some scar tissue, but we really found it more directly into the muscles.
Right. And so you found a relationship between muscles in my low back that were, am I correct to say, deactivating? Is that the
Yeah,
correct term?
inhibiting, deactivating, yes.
Yeah, the proper functioning of my posterior thighs.
Right.
And it was so interesting because once upon a time, my hamstrings were very, very, very strong. And I literally sometimes would bend over and they would cramp, to tie my shoes.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. That's absolutely fascinating to me.
So there are a lot of factors that affect muscle firing. One of the things, though, is when the body perceives a danger or a threat,
Right.
which probably occurred with your injuries, that it will look for what can it lock down, what can it find stability and protection in. So it's a guarding mechanism that creates compensation patterns.
Right.
So the interesting thing about it is there are typical areas we can look. There's synergist and antagonist to each muscle,
Right.
meaning it's working with it or it's working in opposition. And those are the first places we try and look. But when people have had multiple injuries, every body is completely different. And so there is no standard. This
Right.
muscle is related to that muscle, and so one will turn the other one on or off. It doesn't work that way. So we do have to go through and test the body and see exactly how your body decided to find the safety, the stability, and what it wants to lock down. So
Right.
there is no one universal answer for every person. That's what makes neurokinetic therapy so interesting, is
And
every body is completely
different. And I so appreciate that. And I really got a sense of that when you and I worked together, because I'm just going to say it. It seemed like I had an endless amount of compensations.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so people who are very active, and I know you do a lot of weightlifting, a lot of weight training, you've
Right.
done that all through your life. The more we train, sometimes the more we hit a fatigue point. Because if you're training to an end range or to fatigue points,
Right.
you get to that point probably before your body is really ready to give up, because you have added in compensating muscles to get there. So you're already training in compensation patterns.
Got it.
So when you really fatigue is probably when your compensation pattern also gives out. So through that training over time, you are building up a lot of things that change the neurological function in your body to get you farther and farther each time you train.
That's
So
so interesting.
We're an amazing biological organism that can actually do harm to ourselves by compensating to try and keep ourselves safe. We just lock down other patterns to keep going,
Right.
sort of a survival mechanism. But it can create dysfunction and then just not having proper movement anymore until it builds up and builds up. And since we're so good at it, over time, eventually, though, the system learns that there are no more places to compensate. There's no more
Right.
ability. And then things start tearing, breaking, or we create pain or weakness. And that's usually when somebody will search out help or a professional. And it can be a lot of combinations, chiropractic, physical therapy, it can go as far as surgery. But
Sure.
sometimes it's a functional problem where neurologically you can't fire those muscles. And that's where I come in to help get normalized function back.
Well, I'm going to comment on what you just said, because that's so fascinating to me, Allison. And the reason it is because I think it's fair to say I'm pretty good at what I do. And you and I have shared some patients already,
Yes.
right?
Yes, absolutely.
And, I get some of these people who've been through, it might be a great deal of trauma, for example, severe car accidents. It might be severe athletic injuries, et cetera. And so the interesting thing to me is that with these people, I got them, so I thought they were quite balanced from a mechanical perspective and from a neurologic. But at some of them, for example, I couldn't get a rotator cuff component, right, to lock, or I couldn't get a low back or a hamstring.
Right.
And therein, I found you, and we're going to take a quick commercial break, and I want to pick up right there, because that was an interesting surprise to me that even existed, okay?
Yes.
Hey, folks, it's Dr. Nelson Bulmash, the host of Health Matters. My guest today is Allison Pfeiffer, and we're talking about the subspecialty healing practice that she does called neurokinetic therapy. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to be the hero of your own story? It's time to put the power of your health back into your hands. Join us for our free 25-day journey to get your life back now from chronic illness. Our doctors and experts will guide you back to optimal health.
Okay, the standard of care. 3 Australian oncologists did a meta-analysis. That's the cream de cream of research in 2004. And they found that when they analyzed all the research studies published in the English language in Australia and in the United States, that when you take stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 cancer, combine them, that the average survival for 5 years is 60%. And when you add chemotherapy to that, you improve it to 62%. Okay? So a 2% increase in survival rate over 5 years for $300,000 of expense, all the pain and anguish and suffering that you go through with chemotherapy. Great return on investment, don't you think?
Go to www.getyourlifebacknow.live and begin your journey today.
Hello, folks. I'm Dr. Nelson Bulmash. You're listening to another episode of Health Matters. I have Ellison Pfeiffer with me today. We're talking about neurokinetic therapy. And what that is a very sophisticated system of care that allows us to unwind, to take the stranglehold off of many of the overuse, underuse, scar tissue issues, traumas that you've had that stop you from being able to show up in the world and function effectively without pain. Allison, do you remember where we left off?
Sort of.
Okay, not a problem. Not a problem. A lot has happened in that little...
My brain goes a million miles an hour.
Hey, I got it. No worries. So, where I left you was I will adjust certain people. I will do soft tissue work with them. Mm-hmm. And I would think, given my years of experience in my quality of work, that everything would be activated. But to my surprise, sometimes it isn't. Mm-hmm. And then you have this really wonderful, sophisticated system of evaluating a patient and finding ways to go, and maybe above and beyond isn't quite the right way to say it, but to find patterns that what I'm doing is incomplete to find and to take care of so that they come back. Tell us a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah, so when they get adjustments, a lot of times it has a neurological effect as well, obviously. Yeah. So they may feel like it's, oh, good, I'm stable, this is adjusted, I feel really good about this. But the problem is, as soon as they put that system into a strain or a stress again, the compensation patterns immediately lock back on. So they'll be off temporarily, but because we didn't address the actual neurological path that the brain fires to have that muscle, it's almost blind to the muscle that it's inhibited, that's inhibited. Okay. So it goes to what it wants to compensate with. Almost like, you've got an extension cord plugging in a lamp. It's not going directly to the outlet. It's got this extension cord. Yes. So what we want to do is neurologically look at how do we get that extension cord out there so that the brain will then, identify directly to a muscle and not to the compensator. Ah. So the chiropractic adjustments or whatever, acupuncture, there's a lot of modalities.
Other modalities, right?
I believe in the whole body approach to healing. It's not just one modality that fixes it. So collaboratively, the chiropractic piece is super, super important, but then the brain will go back to the neurological process that it has now decided is a normal, which is a compensation pattern. Right. So we have to clear out that compensation pattern by finding what the body's cheating with and just showing the brain the path back to the muscle it thinks can't fire alone.
So you're really, in what you do, the evaluation provides you with a path to say to the brain, we see this faulty pattern and we're going to correct it. Correct. And so you're really teaching the brain how to correct a faulty pattern that is leading to dysfunctional neuromuscular mechanical behavior patterns.
Right. And if you are, physical therapy is often the first avenue people go to find and try and refire muscle that's not firing. Right. The problem is that we strengthen that pattern and it can be a dysfunctional pattern. So we're actually strengthening a dysfunction and it may help temporarily, but it does not clear out the neurological imbalance. Yes. So if you strengthen all the supporting muscles around a muscle that's inhibited, you are going to get better results and you're going to feel all right. until you stop doing your PT exercises and you go back and you start then realizing that the compensation pattern is still there. So it helps as long as people continue to strengthen what's supporting an inhibited muscle.
Got it.
But if we never go back and change the neurological piece that's not firing right, then all the other pieces will help and make you feel better, but they won't be a solution to that dysfunction.
That problem. Fascinating.
Yeah.
May I ask, what got
Yes.
you into NKT?
So it's a little bit of an interesting story.
Okay.
You have a broken back.
Right.
I had a water skiing accident when I was 19 and was paralyzed from my neck down temporarily.
Whoa.
And so that put me on a path, about a 2-year recovery, where I didn't really get a whole lot of care that moved me forward. I got a lot of care that got me hooked on pain medication and
Sure. So many people do.
doing some electrostim and some things like that, but never really helped me recover. So I think that showed me a lot about the physical body. I did not have actual spinal cord damage. I had sort of a mind-body not
Disconnect?
trusting each other anymore.
Got
and
it.
so
Okay.
my brain paralyzed my body as a user error, more or less. So
Wow.
it was a really interesting way to learn the power of the mind-body connection. So I didn't follow that originally. My second career, which happened in 2010, was getting into body work. I did a lot of high-end custom residential design before that, but I got into body work after the economy tanked in 2008.
Got it.
So it caused me to look elsewhere. And I think the history I had with dysfunction in my body, lots of car accidents, lots of injuries, led me to look at the healthcare industry. So I went back to school and got a degree in health and wellness promotion and massage therapy certification and started doing that work. And I was booked out 40 hours a week, which is a lot. Because
that's a lot of massage.
yeah, the massage
my
therapists
goodness.
have like a expected career life of 7 years. And so I wasn't that old. I planned to do it a lot longer than that.
Sure.
So it led me to look at ways to improve my own self-care. And so I was noticing patterns in my clients where if I couldn't get low back to release, then I'd start working on glutes, and then glutes would release, and then I could get the low back. So I had found a lot of compensation patterns already in the body, but didn't know how to permanently change those. And at the same time, I was wearing out my own body. So I discovered a modality called yoga tune-up therapy with the yoga tune-up balls that I have in the office
Yes,
now.
right.
And I originally went for a weekend for my own self-care to work on myself. And what I learned from that weekend was that there isn't a person on the planet that couldn't benefit from using those balls
Right.
to care for their body and release tension and kind of help locked up muscles and fascia. So I went through a lot of training with that and became a certified yoga tune-up teacher. And so almost all my clients that come in are taught some form of self-care with the balls. And that led me on a path to take another training. The place I was going to take it happened to also be offering a course in neurokinetic therapy. And I thought, I was intuitively drawn to the class. I didn't really
Yes.
know what it was.
Right.
But I just thought, there's a reason I'm noticing this. It seems fascinating. Maybe I should take it.
Absolutely.
So in all honesty, I went to the class having never looked at the book and done nothing to prepare for the weekend, and walked in, and within the first day of that training, realized it was the key to everything I had been looking for myself and for all my clients. I was
love how life
unlocking
works
all
out
the
like that.
patterns. Yeah, it handed me the pieces. And before that, I was thinking, well, why the yoga tune-up? Why body work? Why has all this happened? And it was sort of divinely guided that all of that was what prepared me to be able to use the neurokinetic therapy the way I do.
Right.
So all the pieces fell into place.
Love stories
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
You
it
know.
was amazing.
Yeah, that is fantastic. There's so much I want to talk to you about. I think what I want to do is I want to take a moment here. You and I were having an interesting discussion before the show. I wish we could kind of capture that. You and I sit back and then
yes.
play it back to everybody.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the patterns, because often when we talk about having problems, we normally, our go-to is, how were you injured?
Right.
And yet you and I both know that many people come in with these dysfunctional patterns and they're not actually injured.
Correct.
They're just not working correctly. So I want to have two separate conversations.
Okay.
One is, I want to talk about how that happens. And then I want to talk about how it happens with people who are heavily into exercise, who are heavily into
Yes.
training, okay?
Yeah.
So let's go into the first one.
Okay.
We know that you can create all kinds of dysfunctional patterns when you're hurt in a car accident, you fall down a flight of stairs.
Yes.
Let's go into now how you can create these dysfunctional patterns from
Mhm.
overuse, from a C-section scar.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah. Overuse it can be just from activities of your daily life. You know, if you have a repetitive job where you're sitting at your computer all day,
Right?
you are going to be sitting in a chair, and maybe your chair isn't the most comfortable
Mhm.
thing, and it's not the right ergonomically situated desk job
Sure.
sort of area.
Right.
So you will automatically fire muscles to try and relieve pain in other areas. Or if you've been sitting there too long and just haven't gotten up, your back muscles will get overused, or hip flexors or something like that. So you will start to compensate just doing your job every day.
It's interesting.
And so
We're
that's
just-
not an injury that
Right.
becomes an overuse, but people think overuse has to be an athletic overuse,
That's
and
right.
it's not. It's just
Yeah.
activities of daily living a lot of times will create that.
And it's so funny, Allison, because we're
Mhm.
not made to sit for 8 hours a day typing.
Right.
There's nothing natural about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Give me some other interesting cases.
So a group of women that I treat quite frequently are new moms, because suddenly, you know, they're breastfeeding and carrying a baby around all the time that they weren't carrying before.
Sure.
And so they're trying to juggle, you know, 6 bags of groceries and a diaper bag and a car seat and a baby. And all day long, they're overusing everything. And then they'll sit in a position, or they'll sleep with the baby in the bed to breastfeed at night.
Yeah.
You know, different reasons. But new moms are very, very frequently coming with neck and shoulder dysfunction
Right.
and low back pain. And a lot of that comes from the fact that, you know, when you're carrying the baby, there's the relaxin that's, you know, released. All their joints get more hypermobile, and if they're breastfeeding, those hormones stay up. So their body is just in a situation where compensation is going to happen very easily to find
Sure.
safety and stability.
I-
So there's a ton of dysfunction that happens for new moms.
I'm hoping that my wife isn't watching the show, because that woman it was nicknamed the Ant because she was so powerful. You know how tiny she is.
Yes.
And she's so
Yeah.
strong. And I remember being able to lift, I could pick up the back end of a small car.
Mhm.
And my wife would say, "Sweetie, I've held our daughter now for 6 hours. I'd like you to take over."
Please take her.
Yeah. And of course, you've probably heard many men say this.
Hmm.
I'd grab my daughter, who was not large in any
Right.
way and was adorable to hold.
Right.
And in 15 minutes, my back was going into spasm.
Yes.
And my wife used to say, "I don't want to hear any more about how you being able to pick up the back end of a car. And you
Mhm.
can't hold our little 16-pound daughter
Yeah.
for 15 minutes without whining."
Right.
I mean,
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
so it's interesting that my body adapted to being able to pick up a heavy object one time,
Yes.
but I could hold something as light as 16 pounds, 18 pounds.
Right.
And in 15 minutes, I was in
Yeah.
agony. I've got to sit down, sweetheart.
Yeah.
I can't do this.
And we can address that right here, right
I'm
now.
good. That's why I brought it up, Allison.
Perfect.
That's why I brought it up.
So a lot of times people will get into an exercise routine, and they're doing the same exercise routine over and over and over again, and they're improving. They're getting PRs, but they're doing the very same movements all the time.
Yep.
So 2 things can happen. That can create repetitive movement patterns that create compensations.
Yep.
But it also strengthens you in one directional planes. It doesn't give you a cross section of strength. So you could go from holding that car and then try and hold your daughter, and your arms in a completely different position. Your back muscles are balancing in a totally different way.
Yes.
And you have no strength and no ability to sustain that, because it's not a plane you have been training
Right.
in.
I need you to tell my
So-
wife this, okay? I need a little backup on this.
Yes. So you can be super strong, but if we put you in a plane you haven't trained in, you are totally unable to sustain that. So that is one of the things, like Katie Bowman is someone I love to read from. She's an expert in her field on nutritious movement and creating very directional planes
Right.
of movement. And it's fascinating. It's how you maintain my mantra, which is mobility for longevity.
Longevity.
You have to be able to sustain
Yeah.
your level of
With all of life's stressors, it can be challenging to stay balanced and healthy. Hemp-derived cannabinoid, or CBD supplements such as Plus CBD oil, are becoming well recognized as a key supplement to optimize wellness. By working directly with our own internal system that maintains homeostasis, the endocannabinoid system, CBD, can help restore the body's natural rhythm when we need it the most. Learn more about Plus CBD oil and how to balance the system that balances you from www.pluscbdoil.com. That's www.pluscbdoil.com.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Nelson Bulmash here. Again, you're listening to another edition of Health Matters, and I have Allison Pfeiffer here. We're talking about neurokinetic therapy and how it can improve your ability not only to get out of pain, but to think, to feel, and to function in an optimized fashion. And that's so important. Allison, let's talk about it. So these dysfunctional patterns that people like me, we're going to poke fun at me again because it's easy to do. We were having another conference. It's so interesting. I wish those of you could be here before the show because we get warmed up and we talk about things that are sometimes even more interesting than we have on the show. And we were talking about how many people like me I'm very old school. So, I did squats and deadlifts, bench presses, dips, pull-ups for many, many years. And they're very, very effective. The problem is I didn't change up a lot, and now I have a lot of mobility issues. So we've got to work on my mobility so I too can have longevity.
Yes.
Let's talk about more of this because you deal with a lot of people who come in. You and I are dealing with one now, a really amazing runner who has. I think it's really more not just a hamstring, but an adductor problem.
Yes.
And she had. Very effective activation. Was it effective activation for the lower hamstring, but not the upper?
Yeah, her her upper hamstring was overfiring. The lower was underfiring.
Yeah.
Within the same muscle, and people don't realize it actually doesn't have to be at one muscle to another muscle. It can happen within the same one muscle that it's inhibiting itself.
Yeah, folks, this was an incredible case where I did the work that I normally do for high performance athletes, and I got everything turned on, with the exception of her right hamstring, back of the thigh, and her adductors, the inside of the thigh. And I couldn't understand why, no matter what I did to her or for her, I couldn't get that to fire normally.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
Yeah. And she could walk, she could do some things, but sitting and running were creating a lot of pain and dysfunction for her. So we looked at the hamstring firing itself. And so when I put it through some tests in certain positions, a closed chain versus an open chain, and that discusses the back of the knee with the knee positioning.
Right.
That depends which part of the hamstring we're firing. So when you put it in different positions, it would have stability and strength in one position. I would fire it in another position, and we would lose the stability when it'd go back to the first position.
That is
so it was shutting itself off.
Shutting itself off.
Yeah. So if you think about the range of motion of a run, that leg is going through that
cycle of motion.
The cycle of motion. So in the process of running, it was both turning itself off, inhibiting and overworking at the same time, which was just creating a lot of pain for her. So, and then adductors, other muscles would jump in and try and stabilize.
Right.
And that changes the gait, which eventually all of that starts affecting muscles further up. And your back will get tight, your neck. So it doesn't just stay where it starts necessarily.
No, as a matter of fact, would it be fair to say that the longer you compensate, the more compensations you invite or you have?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is usually a primary dysfunctional pair.
Right.
But there can be a lot of secondary compensations that happen all over. So the pain can radiate, and you can get, it can go up to a shoulder on the opposite side. It can go down to the ankle.
Right.
It'll move up and down along the chain in different joints, and it will spread because the body will constantly try and find a better way to support, create safety, guard. Stability.
I had a gentleman step on my Achilles, my lower calf. In other words, probably 15 years ago. I was having terrible back problems, and I was filling out some information, kneeling down on my left knee, and he was talking to me for 10 minutes, and then he just wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
Turned around, stepped on my left Achilles, and spun off of it, and took my lower leg and turned it completely perpendicular. So my lower leg was now on the floor while my body was vertical.
Yeah.
Tore all the ligaments of my medial ankle, the inside ankle. And then all of a sudden, as the years went on, I developed, as you know, these crazy shoulder problems.
Yeah.
And I thought, where are these coming from? And of course, they were coming from compensations from the torn ligaments in my ankle that were creating dysfunction, if you will, of the musculoskeletal patterns all the way up into my left shoulder.
Yeah, because ankle and foot instability, there's a lot of relationship compensators that are the neck, anterior and posterior in the neck, that go to ankle and lower leg and foot
Right.
problems. So that's all linked.
Wow.
But neurokinetic therapy can actually address ligament dysfunction because ligaments can become overactive and underactive as much as muscles can.
Wow.
And that's not a widely
Known thing.
supported theory.
Yes.
But it is a very significant one. Knee pain and hip pain, a lot of times hip surgeries,
Right.
hip replacements, knee
Mhm.
replacements, all of that create massive dysfunction that doesn't
course.
get cleared out. They'll go through rehab and they get to a certain point where they've got range of motion back, but they might not ever get out of pain completely, or they might
Yeah.
not get the full range of motion.
Right.
It's sort of a combination of things. And a lot of times that's where neurokinetic therapy can come in and look
So
at the muscle
valuable.
function and the ligaments and see what's going on.
How fascinating. Most of
Yeah.
us think that ligaments are these relatively non-responsive things
Right.
that just attach bone to bone, and
Mhm.
that's what they do, and they're
Yeah.
happy to be the flowers on the
Yep.
wall of the room, so to speak, and don't get a lot
Mhm.
of attention.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they can do it. Muscles can do it. Scars can do it.
Yeah, and even small scars. I mean, I've had a lot of things lately where, we're doing arthroscopic surgeries now,
Mhm.
so there's not these large openings
Right.
and more. But those tiny scars are just as
Important. In some
important.
cases.
Yeah, they
Mhm.
will lock down muscle function. In fact, my client from this morning had shoulder surgery, and a lot of her muscle function around her shoulder was related to the two scars where they had gone in, and then her other shoulder had also started to compensate, and that was related to a belly button scar. From a piercing. So piercings create scar tissue as well, and that can inhibit, especially on belly buttons. It's a core scar, core muscle scarring.
Right.
That has a systemic effect on dysfunctions. And it's
So-
really interesting that people don't have any idea that
No
that will
idea.
do it.
So,
Mhm.
folks, and Allison, I'm going to venture out. I know I find this in my work. You find that tattoos can do the same thing?
Absolutely, tattoos do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
see
they're a
so-
scar.
Right. I
Mhm.
see so many people that love to get piercing after piercing and tattoo after
Mhm.
tattoo.
Yeah.
And it doesn't occur to me that they have any realization that they're creating scars in their body that can short
No.
circuit the nervous system.
No, people don't know that at all. And but it's a cultural thing. People love them. It's art. There's a lot of reasons people like to do it. Self-expression. But it can, if you end up starting to get systemic
Problems.
dysfunctions and problems,
Yeah.
it's a place to look.
Mhm.
And I find it quite regular that we're working on scar tissue with tattoos and piercings for sure.
Yeah, I just want to
Mhm.
mention I've found a fair number of people, for example, that do ankle tattoos that have kidney stress, low back tattoos that have kidney
Yeah.
stress.
Yeah, because it can affect organs as much as
absolutely.
muscle. I don't
Yeah.
I don't work particularly with the organ systems, but it is all related. The whole
Right.
body itself, what we eat,
Yep.
what we put on our skin, what we do, activities of daily living where we're, if you're in traffic a lot and you're sucking in a lot of
Sure.
fumes down the road, all of that stuff creates toxins
Toxins.
and things in the
Yeah.
body. It leaves a chemical trail.
Right.
It throws hormones out of balance.
Yep.
And all of that will affect the way somebody can neurologically function, the way they can heal
Right.
and recover from things. So it is a factor. If we have people who are not particularly healthy and we're trying to get a lot of this stuff back on, it can be a little more challenging sometimes too for overall health reasons. But
Right.
yeah.
And by the way, folks, if you do get a piercing or a tattoo or any scar, it can create what is called a somatovisceral problem. Meaning, in other words, you have a problem that you do to the skin, and we have many of the sympathetic a lot of the sympathetic fibers that deal with fight, flight, activation, and vigilance with regard to nervous system function. And if you get a surgical scar, if you fall and get a scar, if you get a scar from tattooing or from piercing, you can create these somatovisceral problems. I have found people that nobody can understand why their heart suddenly wasn't working, and they had shoulder tattoos is another great one, particularly on the left shoulder.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so just be really mindful of what you do. I know that we're entering a time in our culture where it's very popular, but be careful. Meaning, if you have health challenges, be particularly careful that you don't do something that makes it more difficult for you to heal from whatever you're struggling with. Okay?
Yeah. Another thing popped in my head just now
Please.
too that I see in sometimes my clients when I take my health intakes and I ask, have you had surgeries? Do you have scars?
Yes.
The group of things that gets left off, unintentionally because people don't think of them
Yes.
are, I guess I'd have to say it's the operations that are not necessary. It's the ones they're choosing to do. And one perfect example was a man who donated his kidney to his brother. So he went, well, that's not a surgery. I wasn't injured. but he
Yes.
didn't realize because it's voluntary. It was
Right.
an optional thing that he chose to do. So he didn't consider it an injury and therefore didn't list it.
Right.
And it took me a little while till we got his shirt off to go, okay, wait a minute. You've got this big scar on the
Yes.
side of you. Tell me about that. He's like, oh, I donated a kidney. It's fine. I'm like, no. I'm like, that
Right.
counts.
Yeah, no, not so much.
That's still a scar,
Right.
even if you did it out of the goodness of your heart and, for the betterment of humanity.
Yeah.
That and plastic surgery, reconstructive surgery, when people have tummy tucks and things like that as
Breast
well.
implants, tummy
liposuction,
tucks.
all of that. That all
Liposuction's a big one.
creates a
Yes.
lot of scar tissue and
Yeah.
dysfunction. And we don't realize it because it isn't a traumatic injury. It's a
Right,
choice.
yeah.
So we don't think of it the same way.
Allison,
And
I
that's
want
a big thing.
I want to add 2 more.
Hmm.
And you tell me if you find these.
Yeah.
C-section scars and episiotomy scars.
Huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge. C-sections, that's a one. If there are any women out there with a C-section, please come see me. I guarantee it has created abdominal dysfunctions in muscles.
Organs, bladder, a lot of bladder,
Everything.
ovary dysfunction.
A lot of women around the age of 40 with back pain are blowing out discs in their back. And
Yeah.
a lot of it, I find the first question I ask is, have you had a C-section? They say, yes. Why?
Right.
And we find immediately that C-section scar has inhibited abdominal muscles and back muscles, and it creates a whole lot of dysfunctions. That's a huge one. And like you said, the episiotomy scars. Pelvic floor dysfunction is a huge one. People don't realize, they get sent to do Kegels to try and get pelvic floor work back on. The pelvic floor itself has 4 quadrants, and there's different muscles. And so you do not have to have all 4 quadrants not working for a problem to happen. One
Sure.
can be overworking and 3 can be underworking,
Right.
and vice versa. It can be a whole combination of different patterns. And if you're doing a Kegel and you're firing all 4 quadrants at the same time, you are exacerbating your problem. You are never going to fix it
That
because
is such a good point.
yeah. So
Yes.
everybody thinks, oh, Kegel, Kegel, Kegel will fix it all, and it will make it worse more often than not. So we have to figure out which part of the pelvic floor is overworking, underworking, and then reprogram that neurologically to get it back on. So that's a huge one. And episiotomies play a part in that. But it doesn't even have to be episiotomy. It can be just birth. It can be a C-section. If the abdominals aren't working, then you can lock down the pelvic floor or the diaphragm to create abdominal strength as a substitute. Jaw goes in to also compensate for just a bunch of stuff in the body. It's
Absolutely.
a global compensator. So
Yeah.
it's sort of endless. All
Well,
this stuff.
let's talk about some of these rare ones. This is quite fascinating because I'm sure there are people listening to this that are saying, wow, really? That
Yeah.
could be me.
Yeah.
I want to throw one at you. I want to throw 2 at you that I think
Okay.
are quite interesting.
Yep.
One is the hyoid bone.
Yes.
How many times have you found, and folks, by the way, the hyoid bone, forgive me, I just
go
have
ahead.
to say this.
Yeah.
Most people are like, hyoid, what's the hyoid bone? I was buying a book at Barnes & Noble once, and the gentleman working behind the counter said, you're a doctor, I have a question for you. Which is the only non-articulating bone in the human body? And I said, the hyoid bone. Wow, you're the first person that's gotten that. Well,
That was his go-to question
That was his
for the day
go-to-
to stump
that's
everybody.
yes.
You ruined his day.
didn't stump me on that day. There are other things that could stump me. So listen, here's the thing.
Yeah.
When we get back, can we pick up right there?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, we're going to take our last commercial break, folks. I'm Dr. Nelson Bulmash. You're listening to Health Matters. We're talking about a fascinating system of care known as neurokinetic therapy. My guest, as you can see, the lovely Allison Pfeiffer sitting to my left. We'll be right back.
Download the UI Media Smart app at uimediaapp.com to watch and listen to all your favorite shows anytime from anywhere in the world. Shows that enrich, entertain, educate, and feeds the conscious cells throughout your body. We bring you never heard before topics in health, inspiration, music, psychics, numerology, current affairs, controversies, and much, much more. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.uimediaapp.com and start raising your frequency now.
Folks, I'm back. What an interesting conversation we're having here. My guest is Allison Pfeiffer. You're listening to me, Dr. Nelson Bulmash, for my weekly show, Health Matters. Allison, let's pick it up. We were getting ready to wait a minute, we didn't even finish the hyoid bone.
No, yeah, the hyoid.
All right, we got to finish the hyoid conversation. What kind of dysfunction do you get with it? And remind for people who just came in,
Yes.
tell them about the hyoid bone, where it is, and why it's a problem when it gets, what do we want to say, unsettled?
Unsettled is a good word for it, or out of balance.
Out of balance, right?
The hyoid bone is in your neck, just above your voice box, is a good way to locate that. But the thing is that it, as Dr. Nelson pointed out, it connects to no other bones. It's a free-floating bone connected only by muscles. So when those muscles get out of balance, it affects that position. And the bone itself can rotate left to right. It can tip up and down, and it can move anterior, posterior. And all of that affects your balance, for starters.
Right.
Because there's a direct relationship. Jaw, hyoid, hips, all of that sort of fall into a category where it creates balance, lateral stability, all of that.
Sure.
So what happens very frequently, anybody who has a surgery, they're intubated. The tube is put down your throat. It is not always put down the most gingerly way, and it can tip that out of place and move it.
Right.
And so when you're in a surgery, your body does what it does. It tries to provide safety and compensate and guard us. So a tube down your throat is not a natural feeling. So even when you're unconscious, your body will try and tighten muscles and do things to keep that positioned, or if it's out of position, to try and stabilize it. So, it doesn't matter how long you're under, at some point it will probably compensate. And then when that tube is taken out, you have enough irritation, that compensation can stay, and the hyoid cannot go back to exactly the correct positioning. So frequently it creates a dysfunction, and you may have someone in your family who regularly clears their throat all the time, or does it or needs to just do that frequently, and it doesn't seem to be from an illness or something else. It can be because the hyoid bone is not sitting quite correctly. There's so many things it affects. If you swallow and you are frequently choking, but not full-blown choking, but just food always kind of gets caught, or you drink and you tend to choke very easily, that is often a hyoid bone that's out of place, that's creating that pressure. So there's a lot of things that can do.
You and I shared a patient who you helped with headaches. She had terrible headaches.
Yes.
Not quite migraine level headaches, but headaches that were very, very problematic for her.
Yeah.
And you did your magic, your NKT magic, and I remember her saying, "I can't believe it. It disappeared like it was never there. The first time in her life."
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about NKT is it's not like, I do it and then we'll see if it works in a week. It works instantaneously.
Yes.
You will know if I found the right pattern, if we've changed it, because you will get up off my table and be like, oh my God, it's gone, or I can move that, or I've got strength, or I don't have that pain.
Right.
It's amazing. And then I can go back and retest what I tested to assess it originally, and the weakness and the inhibition is all gone. So it's immediate results.
It's pretty amazing. I want to talk about one more thing quickly, and then I want to kind of explore what is NKT and what would people expect if they worked with you.
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
Absolutely.
So let's talk about how biopsies, because particularly, the breast cancer issue is prevalent in our society.
Yeah.
And so many women find out maybe that they do or don't have breast cancer, but they have biopsies.
Right.
And tell us about sometimes, we don't mean all the time, by the way, folks.
Correct.
But sometimes these things, these biopsies, for example, can create problems. What do you see with those?
So I had a patient in just about a month ago.
Okay.
And she had some hip pain. Several of her hip muscles were off. Things weren't working, and I was trying everything I could possibly try. And I'd gone through and asked her intake, had you had surgeries? Had you had anything going on? And I really was coming up empty as how to get these muscles back on. I couldn't find anything to bring the stability back. And so it was ironic, because she said, well, I only have 2 scars on my whole body.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, this is great, because you're, in your 50s or something. And she said, yes, I had a breast biopsy. And when I was tiny, I ran in, 7, I ran into a tree. And I'd known her for a while. I'd never noticed there was a scar on her head that was probably 1/8 of an inch long.
So barely visible.
Barely visible.
Okay.
And the scar on the side of her breast actually was less than 1/4 inch long as well.
Wow.
So it was really interesting, because those 2 scars were what created all the dysfunction in her lower body. And she had said that, the biopsy wasn't a big deal and I didn't have, breast cancer or any of this. But it was significant enough of a trauma that the body had locked onto that somehow, for whatever reason. So scar tissue itself is a very strong tissue. It's what it's designed for, to seal up and to have tensile strength when it's pulled. So that is sometimes stronger than a muscle. So the body will take hold and lock down and overuse a scar instead of a muscle, because it can get even more stability and strength out of that.
That is fascinating.
So biopsies, any small injury. And I had a friend who had, when she was also very young, I think 7 or 8, remember the pedals on the bikes had the teeth on the edges? And so I know a lot of kids who had slipped off the bike and had a scar somewhere on their leg, their shin, their foot. Yes, and she had leg muscle dysfunction that was created by the scar from the bicycle when she was tiny. Wow. And it doesn't really matter that the leg injury happened when she was little and now that his function happens now. The body will lock onto a scar tissue at any point in life if it needs a stability point. So they don't have to have correlation to, that scar is so old it couldn't possibly be related to how I feel now. Yeah. The body will use a scar. In a lot of different ways. And it can actually use C-section scars in particular because they're so much wider.
Yes.
One end of it can be overworking and one can be inhibited. So that same scar can be the issue.
Yeah.
And it can also be a different scar to another scar. It can be a scar to a ligament. It can be a scar to a muscle. So there's a lot of different functions, but scars are one of the higher
priorities. Absolutely.
Fixes. And even if they're tiny and they don't look like anything, they don't have to be raised. They don't have to be painful.
Right.
And
sometimes they're almost invisible. Sometimes they're decades old, and you pointed out one was 1/8 of an inch, one was 1/4 of an inch.
And that's why tattoos, they don't look like a scar, but there's scar tissue for each needle incision and all that, and so they do create the same thing, but we don't think of them as a scar because they're not an unsightly or raised issue, and they don't create pain.
So we've only got a few minutes left.
Okay.
Allison, I know.
It's gone quickly.
It goes so quickly, right?
Yes.
I need to find a way to get a 2-hour show. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'm pointing to my engineer and my beautiful, wonderful producer who's hiding behind the computer here is probably laughing at me. So, Allison, I want to talk about 2 more things.
Yeah.
One is, at the end of the show, I always have final thoughts. And I want to share with the listening and viewing audience your final thoughts.
Yeah.
But before, what does it look like to have an NK neurokinetic therapy, session with you?
Oh, okay.
How do you do that? What's that look like?
So people come in, and my appointment's usually 45 minutes to 50 minutes. And I have people come in active wear so that I can have them move about.
Right.
Typically women will show up with, a sports bra and shorts, t-shirt, something like that. So if we need to get to a larger part of their body to do some release work and activation work, we can do that.
Okay.
But I put them through some movement tests, take a really thorough history. And the interesting thing is during a history, a lot of times they will give me clues as to what's going on, and when when I'm testing them, I can see what they're cheating with already, because the body. The beautiful thing is they don't know what neurokinetic therapy is.
Yes.
So nobody stops their body compensations because most of their subconscious anyway. So if I'm asking you to test your leg and the first thing that moves is your right shoulder, you got a problem.
I remember
if it starts by going from upper body. So it's really interesting. Kind of do a lot of forensic study from the moment they walk in, and also the things they say. Well, I go hiking and I go up the hill fine, but when I'm coming down, my back hurts, so I put my 2 hands in the middle of my back, and then I don't hurt anymore.
Right.
Well, that is their intuition kicking in. That shows me one of their patterns, and we don't necessarily know which is overworking, which is underworking, but it gives me clues. So it's a great thing. People are fascinated by it because they do get the instant results during a session. And I typically send them home with 3 to 5. I try not to do 5. I like to do just 3 changes at a time because the brain needs some time to integrate and adapt.
Absolutely.
And they may, I may do a change, and I get everybody up after we do a change and they walk, and sometimes they're dizzy.
Yeah.
It has a systemic neurological effect, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, why do I feel like I got off a roller coaster? All you did was rub my ankle and,
and
touch my knee, and I'm dizzy.
And folks, it's very, very real. I remember saying, I feel like a drunken sailor boy.
Yeah.
Remember that? I was walking for a moment in the hall going, whoa, what's up with this?
It's neurological rewiring. So I basically take it with different people and see how their brain adapts. And we don't do too much because it's a rewiring of how you are perceiving your body in space and time and how it fires.
Beautiful.
So yeah. But that's a typical session, and I teach a lot while I'm working on you, so you know exactly what I'm doing and why.
Yes.
And I ask a lot of questions because how you live in your body tells me everything I really need to know.
I love that. That was so
Yeah,
beautifully
yeah.
said.
Thank you.
Allison, tell our listening and viewing audience how they can get a hold of you.
I would love to. So I have a website, Naturally Well, and it's Natura. Sorry, I can't even spell my own website. Not too good.
Hang
Going
in there,
too
folks.
fast.
There's a compensation at play here.
Yes, my tongue. Naturally Well, NaturalliWell.com. And I have a link right on the home screen to schedule there. Or you can call me 847-477-8659. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have about neurokinetic therapy or your situation. And I love meeting new people and helping anybody with a C-section, anybody who's had surgery. Even if you don't have pain, you probably have a performance issue that you're not aware of as far as maybe hitting a plateau working out, or you fatigue. Lots of different things. Or maybe you just kind of don't feel like you can push yourself any further than you are, or you're worried something's going to be injured. Those are all clues that you have a compensation pattern that's happening. So I would love to help all of you.
All of you is a big number. You're going to have to sit quietly and calmly, waiting in our lovely room. Thank you, and and be patient with us.
Right.
So, briefly, any final thoughts in the next 60 seconds before we close out? Anything?
Well, the other thing I just thought of is that, yes, I can't help all of you, but there are neurokinetic therapists across the country. And if you look up nktdirectory.com, you can put in your area and search if there's professionals in your area. I am a level 3. That's a master level, the highest level. There are levels 1, 2, and 3. And they can help you on all of those levels. But a level 3 is the one that can do more of the scar work, the ligament work, and some of the higher issues as well. But yeah, I would love for all of you to have access to this modality. I think there's about 180 of us in the country that do what I do at level 3. So, and it is worldwide. So if you're in another country, still check that directory, and you'll be able to find people in your country as well.
Fantastic. Folks, it has been amazing being with you again. Love it. It's always such a pleasure to be with you here on Health Matters. Thank you for joining our show today. And Allison, it was such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much.
You're
I've loved it.
I told you would, right? I
Yes,
made
you
good on
did.
my promise. I will be here next week. I will have another amazing guest. Please join us again, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Tuesday. Thank you again. We appreciate you know that. And remember, always be your best.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of Health Matters with Dr. Nelson Bulmash, where we help you discover how to ignite your mind, body, and spirit connection. Join us next time when we will bring you more exciting guests and engaging topics. Meanwhile, feed your mind, exercise your body, and nurture your spirit. The United Intentions Foundation and its associates take no responsibility for the opinions and statements made by the talk show hosts or their guests.